Yeah, and we are talking tax controversy and residency issues today on Long Island Money and Business every Sunday morning from 8 to 8:30 on 540 AM WLIE, brought to you by Panaro Silverman Partners, your own family CFO. We're going to be going over kind of the next segment of a lot of the work that your firm does is really getting involved on the tax controversy side and the collection issues, dealing both on the federal and on the state issue. We've been dealing with a lot of the state residency, but the IRS is a pretty big group also, and I think they kind of want to get a piece of you also. And one of the things, and John and I have it a lot in our planning practice because we deal with a lot of tax, is that this stuff doesn't go away. You have to really prepare for it. But we also see people that have been very successful in their lives, very successful in their businesses, and things have happened to them. There have been economic turnarounds for them where they've kind of been on one side and kind of their business has gone downhill, and they've been trying to continue to run their business, and a lot of times they've kind of either neglected or put off dealing with their tax obligations. And that gets kind of messy, and that's where I imagine a fair amount of your work comes in. People that have not paid their taxes or not filed their returns, and now all of a sudden they start getting those letters, they start getting those collection letters, and they don't know what to do. So where does someone go with that?
Well, first they could come to our firm. You could find us at litaxattorney.com. We have a law firm in Melville, and I do think that if you owe money, you have to address it immediately. They could start taking money out of your bank account. They could file liens against you, which is a public record. And the IRS is actually trying to be more taxpayer-friendly with some of their Fresh Start initiatives, and they're trying to be flexible. So there are alternatives to them just pulling the money out of your bank account.
And be aware that the longer you let it go, the bigger the problem, because interest and penalties will continue to grow. What you thought was a small amount, people are shocked when they see how much it's grown over the years. If they just get those letters and stick them in a pile, and we've had people come into the office with a stack of unopened envelopes, and we go through it, and you can see the numbers grow and grow and grow over the years. And sometimes people try to take care of their old taxes without staying current with what's going on now. In other words, they're taking the money that they could use on their current taxes and trying to pay down old ones, and they're creating new problems for themselves and just making things worse.
So is it better to pay your most immediate taxes and not, or continue to try to pay the back ones?
Well, it depends.
It depends on the situation. Yeah.
And is there a statute of limitations? Because I know some people, when I used to do bankruptcy work, people would come in and they hadn't filed or paid taxes in several years. Is there a statute of limitation? Could they get off the hook if the IRS hasn't come against them and they haven't filed taxes in 10 years?
Well, there are two different statute of limitations. One is for the IRS or New York State to assess you that you owe tax, and then once it's been assessed, for them to collect against you. So it's normally 3 years for them to come after you once you filed, 6 years if you omitted more than 25% of your income, and no statute of limitations if you never filed. However, if you have filed and now they started collection action, the IRS has 10 years and New York State has 20.
So it's a fair amount of time. It's not just going to go away. You can't look and say, it's taken so long, I'm off the hook.
You're not off the hook.
You're not off the hook.
Not going to forget about you.
Interest continues to accrue, and penalties are accruing, and it's expensive.
And we hear a lot, and there, as you probably see, a lot of people advertising, settling tax liabilities for pennies on the dollar. If someone comes in, they haven't paid or they file, but they're just really far behind, they owe six figures, they owe $100,000, $500,000, and there's no way that they could pay that anymore. But they've been filing their returns, they just haven't been able to pay their taxes. So what happens? What are the options for a taxpayer that has not paid their taxes, but they filed?
Well, what the IRS is really looking at is your ability to pay and what assets you have. People, I think, are kind of misled by the ads that say pennies on the dollar, because the IRS is not looking at how much you owe and coming up with a percentage of what they think you should pay. What they're looking at is what you can afford to pay. What they're trying to do is to collect the most amount they can for the government that's reasonable based on your ability to pay. So they look at your income and your expenses liabilities as well as your assets. And we have people who come in and say, oh, my income's, pretty low. I barely cover my expenses, but they live in a house that has a lot of equity. And if the equity in their house is more than they owe to the IRS, then they're not eligible for the program that's called an offer in compromise in most circumstances. But they can try to settle things through an installment agreement, which allows them to pay out over time.
And now the IRS actually has an offer in compromise pre-qualifier tool online. You could go to the irs.gov website and plug in numbers, and they'll tell you whether you're eligible for this pennies on the dollar type of
It's
deal.
a chart that you fill out that you can helps you do the calculations in advance to see should I try to submit an offer.
And there are different levels of not being able to pay. Let's start from kind of the most basic. Someone filed their 2012 tax returns, and sounds like it's got a little construction going on back there. 2012 tax returns, and they don't have the funds to fully pay it. So what does someone do now? They owe $10,000, $20,000, and they just can't pay it at the time of filing, but their intention is to pay.
Well, the IRS has what's called a streamlined installment agreement program, where if you owe less than a certain threshold, you can even apply online, and you can have up to 6 years to pay and really don't have to submit much, if any, financial information to do this. If it's under $25,000, then it's very simple to set up with minimal financial information, and under $50,000, they may ask for a little bit of written financial information, but again, minimal, and they allow you 6 years to pay. But you do need to stay current going forward. In other words, you can't the next year have the same problem again. That would default it, and you'd have to go through and try to do it again if you could.
Right. So that, that's kind of the situation. If you are in that installment agreement and you're maybe going to be a little behind, make sure you pay your current taxes, keep that current.
Yes.
And rather than saying, well, I want to pay down $10,000 on my big obligation, if that's going to cause you to fall behind on your current ones, use that to pay your current.
That's correct.
Otherwise,
in that kind of a circumstance, you would want to do that. You'd want to stay current on paying your monthly payments in the installment agreement, as well as staying current with filing and paying the taxes as you go forward.
And what about on the New York State situation, as far as New York State as friendly? Because this sounds, the IRS always had this kind of lore of being a scary organization to deal with, and you're kind of making it seem like they're not as bad as people may seem. How is New York State compared to the IRS with these issues?
Right. So New York State also allows you to either do an installment agreement or an offer in compromise, and they're also trying to be taxpayer friendly. Their offer program has recently been revised to allow for them to look at your economic hardships. But I have to say, 2 new rules just came into effect in New York State that no one is aware of, or many people are not aware of. And one is that they can now suspend your license, your driver's license, if you owe taxes more than $10,000. Also, they could, without filing a warrant, go after your salary and do an income execution, which is very scary.
So just one day you wake up and find out that your license has been suspended?
I believe there's an exception if you have to go to work.
They'll modify the suspension for a limited suspension to allow you for necessary things such as employment. Because the question I had was, well, if they've suspended your license, how do they expect you to continue to earn income to pay them? But they will limit the suspension. And if you enter into an installment agreement, then they will lift the suspension.
So are the installment kind of qualifications similar to what it would be on the IRS side as far as requisite amount? You're saying $25,000 on the federal side, and you could pretty much get an installment agreement no matter what. $50,000, also straightforward. Are there amounts that the New York State looks at?
New York State does not have those sorts of thresholds. You have to negotiate with the state and see what kind of an agreement you can come to. And in fact, with the IRS as well, if you come forward and negotiate with the IRS or with New York State, it is a lot easier to try to settle things. It's only when you ignore them that they go to the more drastic the more drastic actions to try to wake you up and get your attention and make you try to pay. Especially, they feel that suspending your driver's license is really going to wake people up.
Yeah, and I imagine it's probably, as far as the state goes, it's going to be pretty effective.
Now, it's also interesting, the difference between the federal and the state. So the IRS could file a lien and a levy and go after the money in your bank account, and the taxpayer has the right to challenge that. They could do a collection due process hearing at the federal level. There's no similar appeal right on the state level. So New York State could take an action, and you can't challenge it like that.
Very interesting. So they could kind of do what they want without really giving you the same level as the federal does.
But again, they are reasonable when you do approach them to try to work out a settlement.
Well, at what stage are they filing tax liens and warrants? When does that happen? Is there something where you're going to have enough advance notice, or are they instead going to send you the letter?
Well, they do send out notices and say, you owe the money, please pay the money. And unfortunately, many people ignore these letters. And then they'll send out notices saying that they're going to file the warrant unless you, this is New York State, unless you you call them. But they're usually not filing warrants for very small amounts, under $1,000 and quite small numbers.
Interesting. Well, we could keep going on because there's just so much stuff to go on, but our time is running really tight now. So, Karen, Yvonne, I wanted to thank you so much for coming on and sharing a lot of great knowledge. You could just let people know how they can get in touch with you and find out more information about your firm.
Again, you could come to litaxattorney.com, and the name of the firm is Karen J. Tenenbaum, PC, and we're located in Melville.
And our phone number is 631-465-5000.
And I'm Karen Tenenbaum, and this is Yvonne Cort.
Yvonne Cort.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Sunday, Long Island Money and Business. We'll be back with you next Sunday on 540 AM WLIE. On behalf of my partner John Panaro and myself, Jeff Silverman, thanks for tuning in. We'll speak to you next week. Have a great rest of your Memorial Day weekend.